There's a certain level of trepidation that I feel when faced with the idea of my own mortality. I can't say what it is, but I know it's there. Always I'm looking to occupy my time with something that's useful, but oftentimes I fall short of what I might achieve. Very often my mind goes back to past ills, past negative experiences. I do my best to right my mind insofar as I'm able. Can't stop. Can't go back. It's always moving forward. A train on a set of tracks that never stop. My love for music keeps me grounded. It's something that I value quite a lot. I often think whether it's something that I value in and of itself or if it's the feeling that it brings me. It's often that guilt on that particular topic that makes me not unwilling, but circumspect about developing relationships with other people. When I do go out, I see their faces and I know that I live a privileged existence, that I don't have to do a whole lot to get by. And there's a certain level of guilt that's associated with that. But even if I was taking on the same trials as the people around me are, I would hope that I could face it with cheerfulness, with an inspired hope for what could be, what can be, if there's a proper application of self-discipline and self-purpose and self-direction. It seems sometimes that my desire for pleasure often gets the best of me, and I use it as a form of escaping my own inability to face my problems. It's good to laugh at yourself sometimes, though. Keeps things in perspective. Makes me realize that those people who I didn't necessarily give as much import to as I should have actually served a greater purpose in my development as a more fully actualized human being. Very often, I think we get inured to this sense that if we're not feeling something pleasant, then we're doing something wrong, which might be true in some cases, but not always. Not always, because oftentimes it's the will that we have to persevere through something that is arduous, something that's difficult, laborious, tedious. It's something that grounds us in a sense of reality, in a sense of tangibleness. My mind often dwells on what I could have done better in the past. I try not to get caught up in coulda, woulda, shoulda type of mentality, but I can't help but recollect and revisit many periods. And arguably, there's a sense of nostalgic, what's the word? Nostalgic pleasure in reminiscence. But I try to look at things as objectively as I can, and from that, I try to expostulate further courses of action that I might take that can lead to a more positive outcome going forward. And even though I do this, there is a large portion of me that goes back to it simply for some sadistic pleasure of running myself through an emotional sequence of events in an attempt to attain a catharsis. I often wonder, what is this need for catharsis? And you see that a lot in art, is this desire for tension and resolution, tension and resolution, tension and resolution. You see it in a lot of things. But I don't know what I'm saying half the time. It's good to recenter myself at times when I find I'm spinning out of control. And that spinning out of control, and arguably it's a reason why a lot of people just lose themselves in arts or intellectual pursuits or pleasure or all these. It's this idea of feeling a lack of control over a situation. So attempting to right that feeling of perceived lack of autonomy and agency, it's a way of taking control of the things that you can control so you don't feel so powerless. But why is it so bad to feel powerless? I mean, let's face it, there will always be things that we can't control, things that we won't be able to do, things we'll miss out on. And why should we feel bad about that? I mean, not all people feel bad about it, but I would posit that those people who don't feel so bad about it, they're able to live happier, more fulfilled lives because they're not looking at life from a chronic perspective of lack and not having, and always looking for the next thing, always looking for the next thing. Gotta have it, gotta look for it. Otherwise, I'm not going to be whole. I'm not going to be who I can be, the most of what I can be, the most that I can make out of this existence. My dreams, I'm finally starting to come back into touch with my dreams, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm getting to bed at a decent hour. I'm getting into a better sleep schedule. I'm finally starting to exercise more control. Granted, not so much over what I eat, but when I eat, having a set time where I don't eat anything else. You go to water so that when you do reach sleep, and there's a whole cadre of relaxation methods that I use to create a time and a place that's conducive to rest and sleep. But all of that leads up to the ability for the body to, I suppose, channel more energy towards the brain. And since that energy is in the brain and not going towards digestion or other bodily functions, your mind is able to cogitate more effectively and mull over the images and things in your mind. So the more energy that's going to it, your mind, your unconscious attention will necessarily bring itself to that in a greater fullness. But there's a great desire, not a great desire, a great pleasure that I derive from not only looking at the images of my dreams, and not in a strict Jungian psychoanalytical perspective, in loosely interpreting my dream images and things that crop up in it. There isn't necessarily a feeling of shame of certain things that I do in my dreams. Not that I do a lot of shameful things, but there's plenty of things that, again, I would never think to do in my conscious waking life, which is it's interesting. It's interesting. It makes you wonder if there are, from a Freudian perspective, if there are certain things that you want to do that you're suppressing, that you feel like you can't actualize in your living life. It's very interesting. But stream of consciousness like this it's interesting. It's indescribable. Describable. I think it's interesting how individuals like myself, they, again, going back to that concept of a need for autonomous or a perceived feeling of control over a situation. We need to describe things, we need to label things, and then we need to categorize them. We need to put them in these little boxes so that we can feel at ease, so we can feel, I have a handle on what's going on. I don't have to worry because I know. It's such a humorous conceit of many, many people, including myself. I'm very grateful for silence and the preceding peace of mind, peace of soul, the state of physiological rest that it engenders. I feel like my improved ability to relax and to let go of tension within my body has resulted in me having greater vitality. No surprise. But that vitality subsequently being able to be directed into more productive avenues of activity that are directly aligned with my goals. When thinking about my dreams and how they relate to my lyrical writing, I find it interesting the ability to consciously develop an unconscious attitude toward certain skill sets, and lyric writing being one of them. That's why I really started with stream of consciousness type of writing. Stream of consciousness. When you first start doing that, you come up with some really weird stuff. But after a while, the oddness, the peculiarity of the randomness of what you'll come up with, it starts to phase you less and less. And then there's a whole nother level of being able to just share that with people and not feel so self-conscious that you immediately shut yourself down and you relapse, you cave back into this sense of self-hate, self-doubt, and generally not liking yourself, which I think we have a preponderance of today. I think a lot of it has to do, well, I think part of it can be attributed to greater social isolation, not even just because of COVID-19, but because of the climate of technology and its prevalence in our lives today. It's the idea of we gain our dopaminergical needs. We garner it from something that's impersonal, something that we can fulfill on our own. But we're social animals, so there's this cognitive dissonance that goes on of, well, I'm on my phone and I'm getting what it is that I need. The chemicals in my brain are telling me, yeah, I'm getting what I need. But at the same time, there is a psychological aspect, and whether it's nature or nurture, I don't know. I personally think it has a lot to do with the nurturing aspect, the nurturing side of all of this. Because again, if you were just, thrown into the wild and raised by wolves, I don't think you would have as much of a psychological need for society. But since we're born into society and those experiences form who we are, granted, whether it's your mom and dad or two dads, two moms, whatever, you're being born into some sort of tribe, into some sort of societal structure that ultimately dictates how your psychological makeup is going to be organized going forward. But I don't know where I was going with that now. Then there's makeup. What an interesting thing. It's like Bart and semiotics. It's like we have the things that we say, and then we have the things that we want to say but don't enunciate. We have to use some other means of communicating that, not because it can't be enunciated, not that it can't be talked about, but because there's this idea embedded, I think, in the subconscious of people that symbols and signs and certain things have a greater power to imprint a message, to convey a message more strongly than words can. Because let's face it, language is limited in a certain sense. I mean, it helps us to get from point A to point B, but in and of itself, it's a construct of the human mind to make sense of all this, which is interesting to think about. And with makeup, it's like we're wanting to project a certain image to people, or we're wanting to attract certain people to us because we think that if we look a certain way, or if it's not based on some societal need, it's the idea of, because we are so isolated, we'll sometimes use these things to attract ourselves to ourselves, to engage the processes of self-acceptance through external means. And in a certain sense, I would say that's disordered. But in another sense, I would say that it's human nature. It's It's a way of dealing with our own weakness. And we'll use other means and we'll use externals to help us get to a greater end goal of deeper self-acceptance, of actualization, of realization, of knowing who we are and how we relate to the things around us. But no, fascinating stuff. I, for one, am very happy about my system of physical culture that I've developed for myself, and my attempt at greater discipline in what it is that I eat. From an aesthetic perspective, obviously, but there's also a deeper, more physically and a physical, animalistic, not spiritual or holistic, but a deeper sense of integratedness, of satisfaction from having the strength that you need to go about your daily business with ease and with grace and flow, instead of having nagging little aches and pains that get at you after a while.